back to what you were asking earlier, what do we do to have better conversations? What are the things that people feel honestly they need? Not what I feel they need. What do they feel they need? And what are they missing? And what's it going to take for them to, do something about it?
Well, on the True Man podcast today, let's talk money. Who doesn't want to talk about money, right? Except here's a little curveball I'm going to throw at you. Let's talk about money and relationships. Hey, no secret here. Money can put a strain on a couple and relationships. Well, you might be asking, so Mike, how do we talk about money and relationships? Well, we call on specialist Roderick Givens to the podcast. Now, Roderick is the managing director at Marriage and Money and has written a book, The Most Valuable Wedding Gift, which provides couples concepts, exercises, and tips on how to live in better harmony. Roderick, welcome to the True Man podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
I'm kind of excited about this. It's an interesting subject matter from the standpoint of a lot of couples, I think, don't necessarily want to approach this subject. How did you come up with this concept of doing a book specifically pointed towards couples?
Yeah, the idea actually found me. I had been working in the financial services industry for just under 20 years, 16 with, larger firms. And I started my own firm. And what I noticed when I was looking for individual clients is that most of us were making decisions not as individuals, but in a partnership, whether they're married or whether they're a long-term, partner, or maybe it's another parent or sibling. We tend to make decisions individually and in aggregate. And so when I thought about that, I started putting together concepts that would be helpful for two people. And then I said, well, why don't I put this not as something to learn at the end of your relationship? Why don't you start at the beginning? And that kind of led to me putting together this basically a guide of things I ran into that would be helpful for two people on how and what about money.
So what is the response been to this? And I'm going to ask specifically for men. Women love it. They want to talk about this. We know that. That's a foregone conclusion. Tell us.
Well,
what do the dudes think about this?
It depends on the group. I mean, I think universally, I've been talking about this for a while, is our money conversation is important. And I think that's almost an undeniable yes, confirmation. Then the question is, how are we receiving this? Not just this book. And then that's where you get the rumble. You get the kind of, I don't know, it's not out there. You kind of figure it out on your own. So then the question is, if the group that they're in, whether they are a family friend member, whether they're part of the financial community, whether they're the wedding community, whether it's the faith-based community, whether it's the field of psychology, these are all groups that could contact, a person once they hear it. The question is, would they take time to read it themselves, and would they share it? And so it's been a journey. I mean, I've seen a lot of different responses across the board. It's interesting.
Yeah, listen, I can only speak for my house, right? Sure. I mean, we have always made all of our financial decisions together. I can't imagine making them apart. I did once buy a car without telling her that I traded in my other car and got a car, and, probably won't do that again.
Right.
And I think, for a lot of guys, we got to experience that. Maybe just once, like, right. I'm a powerful dude. I'm going to go buy a car today. But, I think that, for a marriage specifically to be long lasting, I mean, you got to make these decisions together. And so how do you coach people if you feel like, I'm not sure they're in compatible here with each other.
Right.
Like, how do you, if you see that leaning one way, is there a way you kind of coach and try to bring it together?
Yeah, that's kind of a repair. And I think really trying to set it up so that they kind of avoid those pit traps. And I think what I try to do is lay the foundation of, generally speaking, we want to know what we have, where we want to go, how you get there. And then you want to understand human behavior and communication. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is lay out a roadmap of, okay, here's how you normally go about it. And here's some things to consider, and just try to be as, non kind of judgmental, very middle of the road, easy to understand. But some of these concepts will bring in fallacies. We'll bring in loose language. We'll bring in little things about our human condition that it's not so much black and white and straightforward. So yeah, it's interesting.
Well, what about, and I've had this conversation before.
Mm-hmm.
What about people that have a negative, and it could be unconscious, negative view of money?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one partner has a good view. And what I'm talking about is, some of us grew up where we may have heard something like, well, money doesn't grow on trees. And that sounds really innocent, but man, that stuff can kind of sit in the back of your brain, or, we can't sit in the front of the church because that's where all the money is. Those little subtle, they're subtle, but that in and of itself can come back, when you start making money and you're talking about, savings, life insurance, investing. This stuff, it has serious ramification, right?
Yes.
And you got to be in the right frame of money mind.
A lot of it's almost like a common fact that a lot of it is a mindset, mental state. It's an approach. So we do start with, before you get into any of the details, do you have the time, the location, if it needs to be rescheduled, who's responsible for that? Those are things that are, very important before you even get down to a balance sheet or a cash flow statement.
Yeah, even in a house. So what are your feelings on helping couples set up a budget, a plan of action?
Yeah. So I think the second one is the word I would use. I try to avoid the B word because
yeah. After I said it, I was like, I knew. I'm like,
no, I will say budget, but in a general conversation, budget is what you're supposed to spend your money on, or where it's supposed to go. But the reality is, I start with cash flow. I go, before you make any judgments, where's the cash gone last year? Now, the difference is I start to account for one-time, payments versus things that are reoccurring. I look at things that have variability versus consistency. And then it's not so much binary of needs versus wants. What you have is your high needs, right? You have things that go through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, psychological needs. And then you start to go down, and I always joke, is a haircut a want or a need? Well, in the short term, it's a want. You can get away with it, but try going a year, and I have had a haircut a year. Try going a year without a haircut. Some people, or shaving, or, other, personal things. So what I try to do is just lay out these, decision nodes. And I think people are going to run into a lot of them. Maybe not all of them, but I think they'll find it helpful in their journey.
Have you ever had a couple? Have you ever had a couple say, nah, dude, we're good. We don't need to put this down on paper.
Yeah.
Like really back off of it.
Yeah, it happens. And I have no problem with that, because I think there's two ways of looking at it. We're helping you, like a Dave Ramsey, get out of financial hardship. That's typically not the clients I work with, right? I work with Henry, high earners, not rich yet. They typically have a house. They typically have a start of a retirement plan, but they don't have necessarily and by the way, this is in my previous life. They typically didn't have the 500,000 investable assets, but they were building the plan, and one of them had to build a business. So typically, this is what I find: two people, one person will be like, we don't need it, so this is noise. And the other person sitting back, and you're looking at the nonverbal clues, and they're like, right. I wish I could just sit down and knock some of this stuff out. So it just varies.
Yeah. I kind of thought you might tell me that. That's why I just wanted to hear a funny story about couples reacting.
Oh yeah.
What's the funniest story you've ever heard when you
It's
said?
I don't know if it's funny to the tune of what you would find entertaining, but and I had this couple that there was two kids in private school, and so they had an income that was meeting their basic needs, but they had some other costs, and one of the costs, and basically the projections weren't going to meet the goals. They were pretty lofty goals. They were making decent money, but they had some lofty goals. And one of the costs was they had horses. They had and these horses were they were expensive, and I couldn't remember the number. It was really eye-opening. And we had to circle back on the review of the meeting. And it was we're going through the numbers, and it came down to well, we're probably not going to meet the goals of this. And one of the partners looks at me and goes, "What do you think we need to do?" Yeah. And I couldn't look at the partner who had the horses. I couldn't look at them and say anything. It was kind of well, I guess we can probably do some things, but
yeah. And if that is funny, listen, anybody, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, they're horses. Horses are incredibly expensive. I mean, this is
it's a number. It's a number that was above what I thought, but yeah. So generally speaking, it's two people who at the point they're sitting down in front of someone, they realize that they need to get serious about it. And so it typically are better conversations.
Yeah. So why do you think that people are not comfortable having the money conversation as a couple?
I think, and I hadn't looked into this as much. I think it has to do with some level of shame. Even people who, if you look at it from the outside, you're like, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. It's how did I handle this money or whatever resources that were given to them? I think the second part is just from a culture standpoint. Some families, like you said, your family, you guys are in tune. You have those conversations early. It's not a taboo topic. They're just money is as taboo when it comes to the subjects of sex, politics, race, religion, gender, identity. I mean, it's literally up there. So can you imagine some households that just don't talk about it outside of save your money or, don't spend it all in one place?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that it probably happens more than one would think. We were talking before the show. I mean, the divorce rate's 51%. I'm not suggesting that they all end because of money.
Right.
But my best guess is there's quite a few of them that do. And it's probably more because the discussion wasn't had or they couldn't agree.
Yeah.
They couldn't agree.
I mean, I put in about 80 some odd questions in the book of things that will likely come up. And the idea isn't to, light a bonfire. And some of them don't even have to do with money. It could be something as simple as, hey, what's the policy on relatives and friends staying over at your house?
Yeah.
That's not a money question, but I can guarantee that's been a point of contention for a lot of people.
Well, listen, it really is a good point though, because ultimately what we're talking about here is having an open line of communications. And that's really on everything from A to Z. Mm-hmm. Quite honestly, if you could talk about money, you could probably talk about darn near anything would be my guess.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's a pillar of conversation for sure.
Well, what do you think holds people back then? I mean, listen, if you could have a good conversation about money, why not have it?
I think I call it in the book, I call it the back burner theory, which is, when you have a grill and you're cooking food on it, you can put it on the grill, close it, and there's three things that are going to tell you it's done. One is you have an internal timer, right? After 15, 20 minutes, go ahead and check on the meat, right? The second one is that you put a physical timer, whether it's your phone, your clock, whatever. The third one is you go, you smell something? Put out fires. We put out fires because we put it on the back burner. we don't deal with it until it's an issue. So that's my theory. I mean, I'm sure there's other reasons, but a majority of people don't deal with the problem until it's a problem.
That's probably a good majority of people, unfortunately. You know, how can we encourage them to do better? What's a good tip?
Well, I think you got to find their entry point, and that's why I made it a wedding gift. I imagine, you know, most of us expect a wedding gift. That's one area, but you have to hit a point of, it has to be a pain point. I don't think it's a happy point. It's kind of like, hey, I'm gonna jump up and start yoga. You don't find a lot of people doing that, right? It has to be a catalyst. I think there are 5 catalysts, you know, in our lives is just, you know, finding them and then incorporating those in. When you start you know, on the real world, a real job, you get married, you have kids, you change your career, and then you start to kind of wind down. And those are all points that we, you know, need to look at our resources and figure it out. So that's a good question. I mean, I guess my whole thing, I'm not even really a coach. I'm putting the information out.
Oh no, you know,
So I don't know.
I'm more asking it from a standpoint of, you know, how can we help people, especially, I would say, you know, again, before the show, we were talking about this a little bit. We're going through, and I'll have to say in my lifetime, you know, I've seen the economy ebb and flow and things like that. There's some real challenges out there right now. And just some of it's just because we've gone through some really odd situations over the last couple of years. I mean, it was like during COVID, you know, I just assume I'm like a lot of people. During COVID, I didn't spend a whole lot of money. And then, you know, when we start going back out and about again, like all of a sudden, you know, we're spending money and, you know, but with inflation and everything, that's really, you know, causing some strange things to occur, in the economy. So in a time and place, at least from my perspective, I'm having this conversation a lot. I told you, you know, I'm having this conversation about money more often than not with my wife. It seems like it's come up a lot lately. How do we maneuver around in economic times where it feels like, well, it doesn't feel like, I mean, we know, I mean, go to the grocery store, it's like, whoa, it cost how much for hamburger?
Right.
I mean, how do we maneuver through these times, you know, when gas is what it is and hamburger is what it is? I mean, what's a good way to maneuver around some of this stuff?
So I think what you're asking, there are a lot of financial decisions, but are you talking about rising prices? Because that's inflation.
Well, yeah, rising prices are inflation, but that's putting a strain on people. I mean, I've heard people say, well, yeah, I got a raise at the beginning of the year, but by the time you factor in the price of gas and all that, I mean, it's nothing.
Right.
And so, you know, when you're not getting the goods and services you used to, or, you know, roll of toilet paper is half the size it used to be, but it still costs the same. You know, that can put some stress on a family.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the, you know, going back to having a game plan, what you talked earlier. And I think instead of, and I think maybe even the way that some people approach it, like, how do we put out this fire? How do we deal with this inflation? How do we deal with this issue? And I'm like, these all go back, and whether you're in a community that is pretty well defined. I mean, there's these communities like FIRE, you know, they have financially independent, retire early. You got to have a realistic game plan. I mean, you just need it. And that's why I was trying to line it up. It's, you know, it really isn't just about these rising prices now. I mean, it does fluctuate, but it's about knowing what you have, cash flow, you know, assets and liabilities. It also means, what do you have off the balance sheet as far as your value systems, right? What's important to you? What's important as far as your human capital? What is the value of my skill set in the workplace, right? And then what is the value of my social capital, right? And that's, you know, what's the value of people doing things in my benefit where I don't have to necessarily compensate them with money? It might be able to things like time, energy, and ability. Those are in there. Then you go to goals. What are the 4 main goals I talk about? Well, one is do what you want. We used to call that retirement. We talk about starting a business. We talk about real estate. We talk about adult continuing education. Those are things that are going to help us maintain our 40, 50-year time frame. And then how we get there. We talk before we get into vehicles, we talk about risk return. Understand there's both sides of that equation. We understand that it's not just the individual, whether it's a stock, bonds, mutual fund, it's, how they go together. Then we talk about if you need to choose an advisor, here's some things you might want to look at. Doesn't matter the firm's name, doesn't matter where they're located. And then after that, we talk about behavior. So those are things that are a lot, but it takes you down into some more of the weeds that you start to address these things that are not new. I mean, I could have told you about inflation a while ago. I mean, 8%, whatever. I mean, the real inflation number was probably not 2% for a while. So I think there's a roadmap, there's a blueprint we start, and we try to help people get there.
I think a lot of people haven't experienced it in their adult life, and so at least some of the people that I'm talking to are just a little blown away right now. I mean, the last time, we were seeing stuff like this, was for the most part back in the 80s, and I could have cared less because I was a teenager,
Right.
And as long as I got a pair of Nike Cortez,
we all have. That's right.
Yeah, I'm calling it out. As long as I got my Nike Cortez,
got the slides. Yeah.
I mean, I was good, and of course back then that was a lot of money. But so listen, full disclosure, I've not, we met. I've not had an opportunity to read the book yet. So, what is there something that we haven't touched on that's in the book that you feel like is a real solid nugget that you want to try to get out to the true man community today?
Yeah, I think part of it just comes back to what we value. And when I say what, doesn't mean necessarily a physical item, but your morals, your principles, your beliefs will drive your decisions. I mean, it's like, we kind of just we like to look around, and if you want to let, other people dictate what your values are, then you're going to find your answers. But once you understand that off balance sheet of, the values that kind of morphs into, what the value is, of earning potential in the workplace or your own business outside of your house, and then the social capital, if you can kind of keep an eye on those will dictate how we make our decisions. So I mean, yes, financially you can go through all the numbers, but understanding your value system, understanding your human capital, understanding your social capital will be a pretty good indication of how you're doing and what you need to improve on as you move forward.
Explain value system. Now, I know what value system means, but when you say value system, you're talking about personal value system.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
I mean, see, I was laughing inside when you said it, because I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's what he means. And I'm like, because some people just I mean, I see this in a lot of people's driveways, because my wife and I will be like, man, I don't understand. How does that dude over there have have three $75,000 cars, a boat, and we're looking at the house and we're like going,
right.
This doesn't add up.
Right.
It's incredible how leveraged some people are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd be careful, as someone who's worked in the field, I could trust me. Number one, I'm not saying I know that situation, but number one thing I would look at is someone is gifting someone some stuff. It just happens, right? So that happens in families. People get gifted a house and they stay in it, and then they gifted stuff. But I think the harder one to pick up on is, should we, like you and your partner probably already have decided how you're going to fund, or the method you're going to approach paying for college. A basic question would be, between two people, do you pay for your kids' college? Now, for some, it's like, this is an easy question.
That's a good one.
We're on the same question. But the key with values is not so much where you guys agree. And the key isn't where you agree and one's neutral. The key is, how do you work through the conflicts of two people who have competing or conflicting value systems? That's the key to money conversations, being able to recognize that and to be able to navigate that.
Well, that's a bingo right there, because that is the key to a good marriage, a lengthy marriage. You know, and that goes much deeper than the money conversation. We're talking about just basic, fundamental communication habits and staying in touch with each other and getting on the same page. And
would we say in the last 20 to 30 years, have our communication skills increased or have they decreased?
ooh, now that, you know, that's a good one, because I I think we all have the ability. There's so much stuff out there to learn from, right? So you have the ability to have great communication skills, but it's pretty doggone hard to have good communication skills if your face is down staring at your phone all the time. And that's what I see where a big problem is. I mean, you know, we've all seen this. You go to a restaurant and there's a nice family sitting over in the corner and not a single word's being said. And, you know, in between dipping the chips in the salsa, they're, you know, on the phone.
Yeah.
And so I almost have to question whether our communication skills are better as a result of that.
So I guess it's the metric that you're looking at. I think I was speaking up internally, how we communicate internally, and how effective is that communication, or how many times do we have to end up like all the 70s and 80s comedic series were about miscommunications, right?
They were, yeah,
all about miscommunication. So that's kind of where I was looking at it. But to your point, I think we are communicating more or receiving more information from outside sources with these devices. But I would argue our ability to provide one-on-one communication with somebody else, even if it's not in person, has declined in the last 30 years.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Sadly, I think that's true.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, we're communicating with our phones better than we are one-on-one. It feels like.
Right. And so then the question becomes, what level of financial knowledge do we need to know as a family unit or as an individual or people making decisions for the family unit? And is it high enough? And if it's not high enough, what level does it need to be? So that's the question, you know, I'm trying to figure out is, you know, what information, because I could go to whatever depths we want, but I do that at a different level. So the question is, back to what you were asking earlier, what do we do to have better conversations? What are the things that people feel honestly they need? Not what I feel they need. What do they feel they need? And what are they missing? And what's it going to take for them to, you know, do something about it?
Yeah, and they do have the ability to go out and research things. And, you know, there's so much information out there on the financial markets. My wife and I depend heavily on our financial advisor. He's excellent, and has helped us immensely maneuver, you know, a lot of different things. And, you know, I wholeheartily trust what he's telling us. And if there's something I have a question on, I go out and take a look and research it, and try to go further with it, and then come back with questions. And I would encourage everybody to do that.
Yeah, I think you have to have that want. That's where I'm going with that.
No, sir, absolutely.
There's just a lot of, you know, a lot of people who are, you know, who'll say like, hey, we don't have the information. I go, well, it's right here. And then one of the most awkward conversations I'll have, and you know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
I'll have the book and I'm like, oh, and you know, you can buy it on Amazon, but it's like, here's the book. And they go, oh, I should read this, huh? And I'm like, yeah, you should. And they go, you think it's going to be worth it? And I'm like, yeah, I think it will be worth it. It's free. Literally, it's a free book. I'm literally giving you a free book on money conversations. And then they're going to go, and then they act like I'm literally asking for their like third child. I'm like, literally,
Yeah.
this is all I'm asking you is just read it. And then they go, well, and they'll tell me whatever story about how they either didn't have the education or they're doing the right thing. And I'm like, either or, this is good stuff. And it really isn't meant to take you 12 months to read it. This is bullet points, some anecdotal stories, some entertainment, but this is the foundation of good money conversations that should be helpful.
Yeah, I found out a long time ago that I don't have all the answers personally. And that's why, I mean, there's plenty of great books out there. There's plenty of great people that have knowledge in certain areas, and you lean on them. I don't,
Right.
I think it's ridiculous for some people and frankly, some of this stuff is just too complicated to have that much knowledge that you know everything from A to Z.
Right.
Who doesn't want to make more money?
Right.
Seriously.
Right.
I mean, we all want to make more money, but in order to do that, that requires making good decisions. And
Right.
if you're going to make good decisions, you have to educate yourself. And your book is certainly a good opportunity to do that. So as we begin to wrap up today, how can people find you and get a hold of the book? And we'll put this in the show notes, but tell us how everybody can get a hold of you.
Well, I guess the first one is what you mentioned. It's going to be on your show notes, and we're going to promote True Man Podcast. I think this is a great platform for this kind of content. I mean, honestly, how many times have you seen something written? This is written, by the way, this is written for two people. Doesn't matter the gender. Okay. This goes through the alphabet, whatever. It doesn't matter. This is just basic concepts that you should be able to get through. Amazon is the number one place you can go. Just type in the name, The Most Valuable Wedding Gift, or my name, Roderick Givens. I do have Facebook. I'm, putting together some social media, Instagram, but typically it's True Man Podcast, Amazon, and look, be ready for some more content.
There you go. I mean, the key here, if I had to summarize it, and it's why I brought Roderick on the show, is money is it's difficult subject matter, but if it's worth being married, and it is, and if it's worth having good communication with your partner, and it is, then these are the things that you need to educate yourself on. And I think that that's part of, being a good man and a good husband, and being a leader for your family is take your finances seriously and have quality conversations with your family about it, because they need to be in the know too. So Roderick, we appreciate you being on the True Man Podcast, and thanks for all the information you provided us.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely. Take care.
Take care.